In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, dear ones, it's good to be back with you. It's been quite some time, well over a month since I've posted regularly. A lot of people have been inquiring, am I okay? Yes, I'm okay. I'm alive. The simple explanation for that was house blessing season came along, and I had quite a few houses to bless, along with the regular pastoral ministry and the services of the church. And it just became too busy. It became too hectic, and I never really had time to film. Beyond that, that busy schedule also led me to eventually getting sick, and I've been sick off and on for a little over a month now. You can probably hear a little bit in my voice as the last of it, hopefully the last of it clears out, God willing. But we are at the beginning of Great and Holy Lent, and so I wish you many blessings and good strength on the beginning of the Great Fast. I pray that this is a very beneficial time for you spiritually, and I really pray that you enter it with joy. I've been looking forward to doing this particular video for quite some time, and really mostly since Christmas. And the reason for that is because every year at Christmas, I always get what I want because I get myself my own gifts. And my wife gets upset with me. And she says, "How is it that you know what I'm getting you?" That is, she's getting me, but she doesn't know. And I tell her, "Well, it'll be a surprise. It'll be a surprise on Christmas." And I said, I always tell "Don't worry, you got me exactly what I wanted." Well, this year she got me exactly what I wanted. She got me this beautiful icon of Saint Porphyrios. It's an incredible icon. I every time I look at it, I'm just astounded at its beauty. I don't know how well it'll show up on camera because of the depth that I'm using for the camera, focusing on faces. So maybe it'll focus on Saint Porphyrios, maybe on me. It would be better if it focused on Saint Porphyrios, but at the end I'll pick up the icon and hold it in front of the camera so you can see it a little bit more clearly. And what I wanted to share today was what I called a library of Saint Porphyrios. Saint Porphyrios is perhaps not as well known as his contemporary and friend Saint Paisios. He is one of my absolute favorite saints. Beyond belief, this man was incredible. He was so spiritually pure and deep that it is beyond imagination. In fact, some have said that a saint like Porphyrios comes around maybe once every 200 to 300 years. He was a rare gem. Saint Paisios said of Saint Porphyrios, he said, "Porphyrios and I are both TVs. We're both televisions, but I'm in black and white and he's in color." And he always used that to describe how he saw Saint Porphyrios as being spiritually higher and more pure than even he was. Saint Porphyrios' outward life is not that remarkable until you get to the depth of the personal experiences that people had with him. He was born, I believe, in 1906. His father eventually went to work in America to make money for the family, and so I think it was at the age of 8 that he began working for the family. And he worked for about 4 years before the age of 12, when, after reading the life of Saint Maximus the Hut Burner, he was inspired to go and join the monastic ranks, and so he went to Mount Athos. At the age of 12, he ended up at Mount Athos providentially under the care of two brothers who both acted as his elders. And they would test his humility by giving him competing advice on what, or instruction on what he should be doing. One would say, "I want you to do this." He'd say, "May it be blessed," and start doing it. The other would come to him and scold him and say, "Why are you doing that? I never told you to do that." And he would say, "Forgive me." And he'd say, "Well, go do this instead." May it be blessed. He'd go do that. The first one would come back and say, I didn't I tell you to do that other thing? Why are you doing this? "Forgive me." I'll go back and may it be blessed. And he never argued. He never became embittered. They would test his humility like this when they saw that he had a great spiritual depth. So it was around the age of 16 or so that he was waiting outside of a church that was locked. And he saw this old Russian hermit come to the doors of the church, who was named Old Demas. And Old Demas looked around to see if anyone was looking at him, because no one was there. He was there seemingly alone. And St. Porphyrios saw from his hidden place that Old Demas began to pray. And as he prayed, this divine light fell from heaven and enveloped Old Demas and then spread out. And when the rays of that light touched St. Porphyrios, suddenly he had these great spiritual gifts. He could see things at great distances. He had clairvoyance and other things. His elders warned him strictly, "Don't let anybody know about these gifts." But he was already brought into the great schema, which is typically not done until many years of monastic service. and he continued to serve them in great humility. However, at the young age of, I believe he was 19, I could be wrong on the details of this, he became very, very ill. And his great exuberance for obedience and his great love for Christ and for obedience, he would push himself to the point of getting ill. And being caught in a storm one day while collecting snails, he became very ill, and the elders that were overseeing his spiritual guidance realized that it probably wasn't best that he stay on Mount Athos. And so he was sent back to the mainland of Greece. While there, he made the acquaintance of the Metropolitan, who made him a priest, gave him the name Porphyrios, and made him a confessor. After a short time, he was made the essentially like a chaplain at a hospital in Athens, in Omonia Square, which was known as it's kind of like the most run down area of that city. Certainly not a glamorous place to be, in a place that was absolutely full of sin. He served there for about 15 years, where many people going to the hospital would get his care. He would serve liturgy, and people began to recognize that he had great spiritual gifts. From then, he went to just a couple other places, but the purity of his spiritual life and the great wisdom that he had to share and his many spiritual gifts began to shine forth so greatly that people began flocking to him from all over the place. Eventually, he went in the 1980s to where he began building a monastery, which stands today in the Catholicon of the Holy Transfiguration. In 1991, foreseeing his own death, he asked that he be buried somewhere in Mount Athos, but in an unmarked place, an unknown place, because he really wanted not to be reverenced, but all reverence to go to Christ. Again, from the outside, there are some miraculous things about his life, but really it's when you get to know the teachings, the words of this great elder, and especially the accounts of those who knew him, that you really fall in love with him. So people are often unaware that there has been quite a bit that has been translated into English about St. Porphyrios, about 11 books, which is much more than many people realize. So I want to go through those books. There's one book that I'm not including that I've read. I believe it's called A Holy Hesychist from Mount Athos in the Heart of the City, or something like that. It's a very, very thin volume. It's closer to a pamphlet than a book. I'm not including it because, frankly, it's the only one that I didn't think was very good. I didn't think it had much personally about him. It didn't really deepen my knowledge of him. It didn't help me make me feel like I knew him better. So it's the only book that I don't really recommend. But the rest of these I do recommend to one extent or another. Some of these I read many years ago now, and so I don't remember a lot of details, but I still want to go through this library and show you what's available about St. Porphyrios. If you want to get to know this saint, read through some or even all of these books, and you'll be astounded by the wisdom and also by the closeness you'll feel with St. Porphyrios. And also, I think you'll be astounded at how great a saint he truly was and is. To have such a figure in the 20th century is a great gift to all of us. So we'll begin with the most famous and well-known of the books, which is Wounded by Love. Wounded by Love is subtitled The Life and the Wisdom of Elder Porphyrios. And so these are actually the words of St. Porphyrios himself, which make it especially dear as a text for his life. These things were not written down by St. Porphyrios. Rather, they were recordings of his that were then compiled. And so they compiled first this somewhat autobiography of St. Porphyrios, where he talks about his life, and just explains very simply the basics of his life. That takes up through page about 83. And so it's a good length for his life. It also includes the story of him seeing old Demas and what happened there, and that it is incredibly beneficial in itself. So it's a beautiful section of the book. There's also a couple nice pictures. You see him as a very young monk here, and you see the older St. Porphyrios here. But from then on, part 2 is the wisdom of St. Porphyrios. And for the rest of the book, you get different topics. And these, again, are just taken from recorded talks of St. Porphyrios, usually to some of the nuns who knew him. And the topics go from on the church, on divine eros, on prayer, on spiritual struggle, and on the upbringing of children, on illness, which is a phenomenally beneficial chapter, on the gift of clear sight. At the end, there's a few appendices, one of which is the life of St. John the hut dweller, which is the life that inspired him so much. I will tell you that I am reading through this. I will be getting back to, hopefully very soon, doing my YouTube shorts, the spiritual vitamins, and I've been taking them from this book. I'm reading this through for the third time now. And I will tell you that I did not, and I knew it. I knew I did not appreciate it enough the first and second reading through. I knew I didn't. I read it too quickly, and I read it thinking that what I was reading was just so simple that nothing was really sticking. Now there is not a page that goes by that I don't have multiple things that shine forth. This is one of the greatest books of theology, I will tell you, I've ever read. St. Porphyrios, being so uneducated from a worldly standpoint, understood the living nature of the church in a relationship with Christ, and explains it better than almost any saint I've ever read. He is absolutely an outstanding figure, and he has so much to offer us. If you read nothing else, Wounded by Love is a must. You must read Wounded by Love, and I would recommend read it multiple times throughout your lives. I hope that after I read it this third time, that I will read it 5, 6, 10 times more in my life, and I hope that I will take just the smallest speck of what he has to offer and really make it mine and live it. This is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read, and I'm so glad to be reading it through a third time. The next book, excuse me, the next book is not about the life of Saint Porphyrios and his personality, but rather a systematization of his theology. It's called Healing the Soul, Saint Porphyrios of Kavsukalivia as a Model for Our Lives. This is what it looks like. This one is read almost in its entirety on YouTube, and it's by Hieromonk Savas of the Holy Mountain. It's a really beautiful book. It's published by there's a monastery in Wisconsin, in Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin, at the Sisterhood of St. John Chrysostom. And they did a really beautiful job with nice thick paper. And I wasn't expecting to really enjoy this book very much, I'll tell you. I'd read everything else before I read this one. And so I thought, well, I've heard so much of this already, but hearing it so systematized, it's got some beautiful pictures too, some nice pictures of St. Porphyrios and icons of him. But hearing his theology, his dogmatic teachings kind of systematized, and some of his advice put in order really, really helped kind of clear up his spiritual vision. Like what's his true vision of the spiritual life and of a relationship with Christ. I ended up really enjoying this book a great deal more than I expected. And I enjoyed it more and more as I went on. The first section of his teachings is on his dogmatic teachings, which is his theology, orthodox dogmatics, and corresponding teachings. I was enjoying it through that, but then I just after 100 pages or so, you get to section B, which is pastoral care and the elders' council, various charismatic teachings. These are on prayer, on medicine work, humility and psychological issues, on remembrance of sins, on simplicity and sensitivity and cowardice. And then the third part is on his ethos, his obedience, humility. This is really where the book shined. And I was able to gain a lot from this and take a lot of notes for my own spiritual life. And it was also great reminders of things that I had read, but again, putting it in a systematized way helped me to kind of take it and order it in my own mind in a way that it was more helpful. I didn't just pass over it. Sometimes when we read spiritual books, something doesn't stand out to us like maybe it ought to stand out to us. That's because of our own poor spiritual state. And just having it said in a slightly different way, it kind of then is illumined for us and it stands out as much more significant. So this was a really beautiful book. Now, getting into the books written by those who knew St. Porphyrios. The first one is by Anargyros Kaliatsos. It's Father Porphyrios, the Discerning, the Foreseeing, the Healer. I saw the title of this and I thought maybe this is just going to be really poorly translated. Maybe this is not going to be a great book. Out of the books about him, this one made me feel like I knew his personality the best. I read this book and I really felt like St. Porphyrios was near. as I was reading it. This book is actually available. It's one of the few books, fuzz flying around. It's one of the few books that is available. Actually, more and more are available. I shouldn't say few anymore, but on Kindle. And so if you read in a Kindle, if you can't find the physical copy, but the physical copy is usually easy to find. What I really enjoyed about this book was it's all written from just one person who knew St. Porphyrios over the course of many years. And they would call him Papuli, which is an endearing term for a priest in Greece. And all the stories about him from this one man, and how St. Porphyrios interacted with his family, what it was like having him in his home, the things he taught. This is a book that I read when it first came out. It was first published in 2015. I'm not sure when the English edition first came out. But I know I read it when it first came out immediately, 2009. Okay, so 2009, I read this immediately. And it's been since 2009 that I've picked it up. I want to read it again. But I remember loving this and feeling like, again, I really got to know St. Porphyrios on a more personal level by reading this particular book. Now we get into this, is it a trilogy or quadrilogy of books that I think were published by the same publisher, and are all different accounts of people who knew him, some of them having multiple people, some of them just being one person. But they're definitely translated from Greek. Some of them have some typos and things. Don't worry about that. Just learn. And so I'll kind of go through these. So first is Constantine Yanitsiotis with Elder Porphyrios, a spiritual child remembers. With Elder Porphyrios. This is a nice thick book. I mean, you've got over 400 pages of different teachings of St. Porphyrios, different encounters with him, things he said about really everything under the sun. Finances, how he viewed work in the concept, the idea of Martha and Mary, and what their places is in the spiritual life. On how to pray humbly, how to chant humbly, on just really various topics. Again, I read this when it first came out in English. It's been quite some time, 2001, so this is even older than the other one. And so I don't remember a lot of specific details of this. I do remember, however, that I really enjoyed this one. It wasn't my favorite out of all of them, but I really benefited, as I benefit from all these books of reading of St. Porphyrios. And you may not get a perfectly chronological view of St. Porphyrios' life in this, but there are so many great stories that I was flipping through this the other day, and I'd forgotten so many of them. Again, all these books I really want to reread, but so many of these stories, they highlight such important aspects of the spiritual life. I mean, this is like, these types of books, especially for a priest, are great because you get so much homily material from these. Just, telling people these stories is so uplifting for them. I highly recommend that one. Of this, again, I kind of call it a quadrilogy. Probably the one I liked the most is this one, Elder Porphyrios, Testimonies and Experiences by Klitos Ioannidis. This one is really written by many different people. It's a lot of different interviews that were done. Many of them were done on the radio and then transcribed, and it's interviews of people who knew St. Porphyrios. And so again, some of the accounts are better than others. Some of them you read through and you think, well, I don't know how beneficial that was. All you did was give general aspects of the fact that he was loving and humble and obedient. We know all those things. But other ones, you get these little stories, you get these little nuggets that are so great that I really fell in love with this book. So this is now the third edition. I know I had the first edition somewhere, but over the course of the years, I've given many of these books away to benefit people, and they don't always come back, and that's okay. I just want people to benefit from them. So this one I know is also, at least I knew, was available on Kindle. Maybe it still is. These four is probably my favorite, just because you get so many different voices and you get different people's perspectives on St. Porphyrios. The one that I probably liked the least, but it's not to say I didn't like it. To like it the least means like I give it a B instead of an A plus. Is this one, Miraculous Occurrences and Counsels of Elder Porphyrios? It doesn't have an author on the cover, but let's see. It doesn't give. It just says, as they were heard and they were seen and lived by some of his spiritual children. So it's various people. First edition in English was published in 2013. Again, I read these all right when they were first published. I do remember getting a lot of great stories from this. I do remember enjoying it quite a bit. I think I was just on such a high from some of the other books that this one I felt didn't live up to them. But that may change. That view may change, just like my view on Wounded by Love has just grown over the years. So I plan on rereading all of these. They're all quick reads, by the way. You know, they're not. There's a lot of stories that it's not small print. This is over 300 pages of all these stories from people who knew him, and especially from a nun. You know, memories of a nun about Saint Porphyrios, which is a beautiful perspective on him. So this is also a wonderful. And then the fourth one is the shortest. It is by monk Agapios. It's called The Divine Flame, Elder Porphyrios Lit in My Heart. This one is much shorter. You can see it's just under 100 pages. Very, very short. But again, it's just one person's experience with just short snippets about eating too much, some healings that he himself related to me. Did the martyrs feel pain concerning his cancer? About vigils, about anger. There's so many great little stories in this, and I remember really loving this one, and again feeling Saint Porphyrios. He's just such an endearing figure. I can't really describe it, but he could be very, very. A lot of people read these things, they don't realize that he could be very, very stern and solid on certain Orthodox principles. There were certain lines that he just didn't cross, and he believed in keeping to a strict Orthodox understanding of things, and living the canons himself. Now, when he first became a confessor, he was very strict with people utilizing the canons, but he saw that most people can't bear that. And so he became much softer in his approach. But while he was soft with others, he was tough on himself, but never in a way that seemed stern or angry, because it was always out of love, which is one of his constant themes. Do everything out of love and it becomes easy. And so sometimes we read these, and he becomes endearing in a way that's so soft. Maybe we think that we shouldn't be tough with ourselves. But if you live what he says, you realize that because love is the driving force, if I had just honestly 1/1000th of the love for Christ that he had, my spiritual life would be immensely better. And I would be tough on myself in a way that wouldn't feel tough. I would feel like instead I was living more purely for Christ's sake, out of love for him. And then the final three, how many have we done so far? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, I think. Yeah, 8, 9, 10. And then I said the 11th was the one that I didn't like so much. The last three are this trilogy of books that I will tell you, of all of these were these have the worst editing by far. They're very, very poorly edited. There are mistakes and typos all over the place. Who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter. Saint Porphyrios the Prophet Witnesses. It's not a great title from an English standpoint. Saint Porphyrios the Prophet Witnesses. There's volume 1, 2, and 3. So, why is it called this? Because this is what the book is, Witnesses. It is simply stories. Here's 41 in the first volume. It's just going through various people's. It says witness of Mrs. H.K. Athens. And she gives her remembrances of St. Porphyrios. Some of them are full of beautiful teachings. Some of them are full of incredible miracles. I loved going through all three of these books. I absolutely loved it. As I read these things, the grace that Saint Porphyrios had you feel like you're surrounded by it, and you just fall in love with him more and more, and you realize what a great figure he actually was and is. These three books were such a pleasure, a spiritual pleasure to go through. You get stories from close spiritual children, stories of people who only met him once, stories of monks, stories of nuns who served under him. You get these incredible stories of Saint Porphyrios coming into contact with somebody who lived a long distance away, maybe even a foreign country, and he would sit there and look at them, and then he would begin describing the village they were from, telling them what the name of the church was that they were from, describing the street names, telling them all about their family members, and they would sit there and say, "Yerunda, elder, how could you possibly know any of this?" But he could just spiritually see. That's it. He would tell people about things that had happened in their life that they had no explanation for, they were devastated by, and he would give them the spiritual reason for why God allowed it and why it happened. And suddenly they would walk away completely lifted, with their soul completely light again. It tells stories of people who went to visit him when he was very, very ill at the end of his life. He had a tumor in his on his optic nerve. He was blind, cancer. I mean, he was so ill, and people would go and see him, and they'd be disappointed to find that he was not taking visitors that day. And as they'd be walking away, one of the nuns would come out and say, call that person by name and say, so and so, the elder would actually like to see you. Come. I was astounded. I didn't tell anybody my name. And they'd come in, and he would know exactly what they were there for, what was bothering them. Saint Porphyrios was just this unbelievable figure in church life. He is absolutely one of my favorite. It's one of the reason that I commissioned this icon of him, and was so happy to receive it before Christmas. Saint Porphyrios is such a gift, and so of these 10 books, I will tell you, they are so worth your time. And if you're watching this right as I published this video, if you've never had a chance to sit down and really take in good spiritual reading during Lent, and you don't have good spiritual reading planned, purchase 2 or even 3 of these books and read a little bit every day. Some of them I would go very slowly through, especially Wounded by Love. But most of the ones with stories about him, you can read relatively quickly and really benefit from them. So as promised, let me take this. I'm trying to touch this icon without actually touching the gold on it. Eventually I'll get having a parishioner make a box, but I'll hold it up so you can see it. This incredible icon of Saint Porphyrios, one of my all-time favorite saints. Again, such a gift to Orthodoxy. May we all have his constant intercessions from heaven, where he undoubtedly dwells, and out of love for Christ and others, he continually prays for us. May we have his blessing always. In the words of the great saint of Romania, Calliope of Siastria, may heaven consume you. Amen.